government's continued lack of urgency in dealing with this, our most serious and seeming intractable challenge, the housing disaster, has been exposed again by the introduction by Fine Gael of this amendment. This bill, which addresses dereliction and vacancy, should not and should not be allowed to be delayed any longer. Dereliction and vacancy are twin scourges which blight our cities, towns and villages, and which, without exaggeration, are actually leading to the deaths of communities. Vacancy and dereliction hollow out our towns and villages. They cause particular issues where there are not sufficient new houses being built to replace them. In towns and villages, including in the Gaeltacht, people are crying out for housing, while landowners are hoarding sites suitable development, and owners of derelict buildings are getting away scot-free. Derelict buildings not only deface our landscapes and streetscapes and undermine communities and counties such as Sligo, Leitrim and Donegal, but they also contribute to the homeless crisis and the chronic and systematic housing shortages which we endure, and which will continue to endure as long as the government parties continue to block such efforts as this addresses the elements like something like this which could be used to address this crisis. The 2024 crisis showed that there were 163,433 homes vacant or derelict, and that 48,000 of them have been vacant since 2016. We all welcome, of course, advances made under the vacant and derelict refurbishment grant schemes in recent years, but the numbers show that more needs to be done. In April, Minister Brown announced that 2,000 homes have been brought into use since the scheme was launched in 2022, and we're delighted. Well done on those 2,000 homes. But now only another 161,000 to go to actually bring back into home the scale of the problem. This is about 8% of our national housing stock. The vacant and derelict grants work well for a certain portion of people and a certain portion of properties. They're not perfect, no scheme in, so let's look what we can do to bring the other 161,000 back into use, and what we can do to bring hoarded land into play for development. Developments such as the Mill Apartments in Ballysadere, just 10 minutes from Sligo town, in which 60 to 80 apartments which were abandoned unfinished when the Celtic's tiger roars turned into a death rattle. Substantial premises on the main street in Bundoran and on the approaches into Ballyshannon abandoned and derelict, not just for years but for decades. This story is repeated in every town, every village, right across the country. In relation to the development of empty spaces within urban centres, the layout of many of our towns and villages evolved or were planned for over 100 or 150 years ago. They met the needs of the population that no longer exist, and their layout, which may have made sense at the time, no longer serves a functioning purpose. They are, which we could see today by the briefing by Minister Noonan, or that Senator Noonan, Minister Noonan organised, that are often hidden from the eyes of the public. Large parts of the towns are often redundant. For instance, in Sligo town, behind one of our main streets, High Street, a street itself which no longer fulfils the function usually associated with that name, and which itself features substantial portions of derelict and abandoned properties. In fact, the dereliction became so bad that a large section consisting of 5 substantial terrace properties had to be demolished with urgency last June when it began to collapse. Many buildings these buildings had been unoccupied and been a blight for many years. But behind this building on High Street, there is a vast area of 1.9 hectares, which goes to meet Old Market Street, forming a rough triangle with Castle Street and Steeling Street. Presumably this would have previously contained large yards necessary to the trades which went on at the time and are no longer required. But this is just one of 14 regeneration sites proposed for Sligo town in the 2024-2030 County Development Plan, which in total takes in 32.3 hectares. I could go on and on and on about Sligo, but I'd love to see exclusions from development. There's one part of the bill that I just want to talk briefly about. I'd love to see exclusions from development to land that has been actively farmed within towns or village boundaries, or which is actually being used for leisure and community activities. When we see brownfield sites such as 80 hectares available within Sligo town, we see that we do not need to encroach further upon our precious green spaces. I would like to quickly address the vacant homes tax, and would like to see the Department of Housing and Government account for the failure of local authorities, like what has been said here before, to collect the vacant homes charge. But I would question whether the vacant homes charge, which is currently supposed to be levied at 5 times the rate of the property tax, is actually being collected at all currently, and I would urge the Department to address this. And I hopefully I can have another discussion on this. I would also like to question whether there is a need to exclude holiday homes. I would welcome a discussion on those 2 aspects of the bill, but other than that, I'm absolutely delighted to be supporting it and to be seconding the bill.